G'day, Shane Dowling here from kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has announced today, 1st of October, that she's resigning as Premier. The reason for doing that is because of the Independent Commission Against Corruption has announced they're investigating her for potential corruption in her role as Premier. Now, if they're doing that, you can almost guarantee they've got rock solid evidence of her corruption, and she was going to be forced to resign anyhow, so she wasn't really left with much option. Now, probably the key element that has forced her resignation is when she was in the witness stand at ICAC last year in relation to their investigation into a former boyfriend, that she was perjuring herself all over the park. She was just lying and lying and lying. It was blatantly obvious. Now, the ICAC investigators would have looked at that and said, well, she's lying so blatantly, she's obviously got a lot to hide, and they would have investigated further. And it looks like they found further evidence, which has forced her resignation today. She's not only resigning from as Premier, but she's also resigning from Parliament. To me, that says she knew she was going to have to resign from Parliament eventually anyhow. It's better to do it now than 18 months' time when there's the New South Wales government will be at the election again. I think in March 2023, I think, is when the next election is. So if she hadn't resigned now, it's fairly likely that she was going to have to resign just before the next election, which would have done a lot of damage to the government and a lot of damage to the party. Now, for her to sit back and try and blame ICAC for her resignation, trying to imply that they were slack and they were lazy and etc., which is what she's done during her resignation speech, which went for 6 minutes. But we'll just have a quick listen to the first 3 minutes of it now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to make a public statement and won't be taking any questions. I've had to make an extremely difficult decision overnight, but one which I feel obliged to do because of the love and respect I have for the people of New South Wales and the high regard with which I have for the office of Premier. I was advised late yesterday afternoon the Independent Commission Against Corruption will today release a public statement in which it will state it is investigating allegations made about me concerning matters relating to the former member for Wagga Wagga. As it is clear from the ICAC statement, the issues which it is investigating are historic matters that have already been the subject of numerous attacks on me by political opponents in the last 12 months. Many of the matters were the subject of questions I was asked by the opposition while appearing before an Estimates Committee hearing early this year. I want to be very clear. In all the decisions I have ever made as a Minister or as Premier of New South Wales, my first consideration has always been the well-being and welfare of the people of this state. I state categorically I've always acted with the highest level of integrity. History will demonstrate that I've always executed my duties, again, with the highest level of integrity for the benefit of the people of New South Wales, who I have had the privilege to serve. As the Leader of the New South Wales Government, I have expected the highest standards of myself and my colleagues. I have made it clear on numerous occasions that if any of my ministers were the subject of allegations being investigated by an integrity agency or law enforcement, then he or she should stand aside during the course of the investigation until their name was cleared. The reason for my stance was not to have made any presumptions as to their conduct, but rather to maintain the integrity of the public office which that person has held whilst an investigation was completed. That same standard must always apply to me also as the Premier. However, standing aside is not an option for me as the Premier of New South Wales. The people of this state need certainty as to who their leader is during the challenging times of the pandemic. I cannot predict how long it will take the ICAC to complete this investigation, let alone deliver a report in circumstances where I was first called to give evidence at a public hearing nearly 12 months ago. Therefore, it pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier. My resignation will take effect as soon as the New South Wales Liberal Party can elect a new parliamentary leader. In order to allow the new leader and government a fresh start, I'll also resign from the New South Wales Parliament once I've consulted the Electoral Commission on appropriate timing for a by-election given the COVID restrictions. My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time, but the timing is completely outside of my control, as the ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history. That is the ICAC's prerogative. Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do. I love my job and I love serving the community. but I have been given no option following the statement that's been issued today.
Now, you've heard what she said for her resignation. What she didn't get into is all the corruption. One example, last year she was caught pork barrelling $250 million of taxpayers' money to win the 2019 election. If you don't know what pork barrelling is, that's where they spend taxpayers' money at certain electorates because I think they either can win that electorate or they're hoping to win it. And that means they spend a lot less money at other electorates which could use the money. So the rich get richer, the poor get the picture, so to speak. Now, she made a statement, a public statement, saying, well, that's not actually illegal. Well, maybe it's not illegal, but her office started shredding documents in relation to the pork barrelling. And at the time they were shredding documents, they also knew there were potentially court cases that would subpoena those documents. Now, that would be illegal. That's trying to pervert the course of justice. I don't know what's come of that. I wrote about it last year. I've written a couple of articles about it. You'll see on my website. In October last year, I wrote an article, Gladys Berejiklian purges herself at ICAC and admits to Friends with Benefits relationship with corrupt former MP Daryl Maguire. And also in November last year, Liberal Party tried to normalise corruption with a scandalous statement from New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian. So for her to try and trivialise, which she's tried to do, her reason for resignation, I think you'll find over the next few months that a lot of people are going to dig a lot further and there's going to be a lot more corruption in relation to Gladys Berejiklian than most people probably realise. Other than that, make sure you visit my website. You can check out those 2 articles and make sure you follow my website via email, which is free. And every time I publish a new article, you get a free email notification letting you know the article's there to be read.